Ken Shannon, one of the greatest track and field coaches America ever produced. 32 years, one university, 14 NCAA champions. On Thursday evening, his family confirmed he was gone. He was 89 years old, and once you hear why his athletes are still talking about him today, you'll understand what made him different from every coach who ever lived. Ken Shannon grew up in Porterville, California. As a kid, he used to throw the discus on his family's farm, chasing it through the mud of a hog lot next door every time it went too far. He did it over and over because he loved the feeling of watching it fly. That detail, small as it sounds, says everything you need to know about who he was. He was never chasing medals. He was chasing the thing itself. He was a standout athlete at Porterville High School in both track and football, fast enough and talented enough to earn recognition in both. The combination of football's discipline and track's technical precision shaped how he would eventually think about coaching. After graduating, he earned a BS in physical education from Occidental College in Los Angeles, where he did not just compete, he began coaching. He worked on both the football and track staffs at Occidental, figuring out early that building athletes and solving technical problems was the thing that truly drove him. Some people find their calling late. Shannon found it young. From Occidental, Shannon made his way to UCLA as an assistant coach under Jim Bush, one of the most respected college track coaches in the history of the sport. Bush ran an elite, demanding program, and Shannon absorbed every detail he could. In 1966, those Bruins won the NCAA team title. Shannon was on the staff that made it happen. He had seen a national championship built from the inside, and he understood now exactly what it took. The best opportunity of his life was just 2 years away. The University of Washington hired Shannon as head coach in 1968. Athletic director Joe Kearney, a track and field enthusiast, brought him north to Seattle and gave him the keys to a program in need of direction. Shannon set his goal from the start: win a national team championship. He never left. For 29 years, he led the Huskies as head coach. He stepped down in 1997, but he was not done. He had made promises to athletes he had recruited, and he intended to keep them. He came back as a volunteer, a six-tier assistant, collecting just enough to pay for his parking at the university, and kept coaching the field event athletes who needed him. He finally walked away for good in 2000, 32 total years at one school. The longest continuous coaching tenure Washington had seen since the legendary Heck Edmondson. That decision to come back and honor his word to his athletes tells you exactly what kind of man Ken Shannon was. Championships were important, but the people inside them mattered more. When people talk about Ken Shannon, they talk about throwers, the hammer, the discus, the shot put, the javelin. Shannon turned the throwing events into the identity of Washington track and field, building a national powerhouse in events that most programs treated as secondary. His athletes combined for 14 individual NCAA titles. 12 of those came in the throwing events. The most dominant athlete Shannon ever coached was hammer thrower Scott Nielsen. Nielsen won the hammer all 4 years of his collegiate career, 4 consecutive NCAA titles from 1976 to 1979. He also won the weight throw every year from his sophomore through senior seasons. 7 NCAA titles total. The most of any Husky in program history. In the spring of 2025, Nielsen became the first Washington athlete ever inducted into the USTF-CCCA Collegiate Athlete Hall of Fame. Shannon was there in Eugene to see it happen, watching his former athlete receive the sport's highest collegiate honor. It was one of his final public appearances as a coach and a mentor. But the single most remarkable afternoon in Shannon's career may have been the 1976 Pac-8 Championships. That day, Washington swept every single throwing event at the conference meet. Russ Vincent won the shot put. Boris Chambul won the discus. Scott Nielsen won the hammer. Roddy Wallaco won the javelin. 4 events, 4 Huskies, 4 championships. It had never been done before in conference history. It has not been done since. At that same year's NCAA Outdoor Championships, Chambul won the national discus title and Nielsen won the hammer. 3 years later, at the 1979 NCAA Championships, Nielsen defended his hammer crown for the 4th consecutive time, and Tom Sinclair won the javelin, giving Washington 2 national titles in a single day. These were not flukes. This was a program operating at the top of its sport, built from the ground up by one coach. The throwing excellence Shannon produced did not go unnoticed at the national level. In 1976, he served as the javelin assistant for the United States Olympic team at the Montreal Games. 8 years later, in 1984, he returned as the throws coach for the entire U.S. Olympic men's team at the Los Angeles Games, coaching on home soil at one of the most celebrated Olympic Games in American history. He also represented the United States at the 1979 Pan American Games, the 1986 Goodwill Games, and the 1994 Pan-African Meet in Durham, North Carolina, where he served as the U.S. national team's head coach. Shannon's program produced more than throwing champions. His 1986 NCAA decathlon champion, Mike Ramos, set the NCAA record in the event, one of 10 NCAA records produced by Shannon's athletes across his tenure. Washington won 6 conference decathlon titles in the decade from 1977 to 1986, with Ramos alone claiming 3. The Huskies also dominated the javelin, winning 10 conference titles in that event under Shannon's watch. His reach covered every field event on the program sheet. When the NCAA officially began sanctioning women's championships in 1982, Shannon made sure Washington was not left behind. The program's first-ever individual NCAA titles on the women's side both came in the throwing circle. Helena Usitalo won the javelin in 1986. Jennifer Ponath won the shot put in 1988. They were the trailblazers for every Husky woman who came after them. Shannon coached them the same way he coached everyone, with high standards, high expectations, and an unshakable belief in what they were capable of. By the time he retired in 2000, Washington had recorded 12 top 25 finishes at the NCAA Outdoor Championships. 5 of those were top 10 finishes, all coming during the 1970s. The program's best result was a tie for 5th place in 1979. Across his 32 years, Shannon produced 81 All-Americans, 39 conference champions, and 10 NCAA records. At the end of his career, Shannon reflected on what made it hard to leave. He described how the sport had shifted around him: new javelin regulations, fewer scholarships for men, competing programs building dedicated track facilities while Washington stayed in a football stadium. He called it eating at him. It was time. But even in retirement, he could not completely step away. He talked about the track at Liberty Bell High School near his retirement property in Twisp. He said that if they asked him to help out, he probably would. He retired to 10 acres of farmland in the Methau Valley with his wife, Janet. He had mentioned the downwind throws he might get off a canyon on the property. Even at 63, stepping away from the sport he had spent his life in, his mind went straight to the next throw. That was Shannon. In 2001, Washington inducted him into the Husky Hall of Fame. The program named a signature home meet, the Ken Shannon Invitational, in his honor. When UW Athletics announced his passing on April 24, 2026, condolences poured in immediately. Former athletes filled pages with memories. Their words were not just about what he had coached them to achieve, they were about who he had taught them to become. Ken Shannon was 89 years old. He spent 32 of those years in Seattle, turning a program with no national identity into a factory for all Americans. He coached 2 U.S. Olympic teams, produced 14 NCAA individual titles, and mentored athletes who earned their own halls of fame. He built the foundation that Washington Track and Field stands on today. Scott Nielsen, 7 NCAA titles, had just stood on a stage in Eugene while Shannon watched from the crowd one final time. But what people remembered first was a coach who came back as a volunteer because he had given his word. He understood the point was never the medals. The point was the people. That is who Ken Shannon was. Washington Track and Field will never be the same without him.